In this lesson, we'll learn about the principle of squash and stretch. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here we have our animation of our bouncing beach ball that we created in the previous lesson where we were learning about timing and spacing. So what can squash and stretch do for your animations? Well, to put it simply, you'll have something that feels a lot less rigid and more flexible. You can just breathe in a whole nother layer of life into whatever object or character, really anything that you're animating. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this and let's kind of scrub through and examine what we have currently. So basically, you want to look at the form at this point. It's just a circle, right? That's what this beach ball is here. The shape is a circle. It's a fixed shape as we move through time here. That shape does not change as we have it right now. So it's very rigid, and that rigidness is really emphasized even further when it's moving. Our eye picks up on that. So to really kind of add a lot more believability to this, a lot more flexibility, just make it more interesting, we may want to squash and stretch this ball on different frames, okay? And of course, it depends on what it is you're animating, what it is you're trying to convey as far as the weight of the object, the buoyancy of it. So what I want to go ahead and do first is we're going to select the beach ball itself, so this beach ball layer. And on the first frame here, I'm going to go ahead and just set a keyframe. So I want to preserve the shape or the state of that ball on the first frame. I'll copy that keyframe. We'll place that on the last frame of our animation here. And then on frame 15 where the ball makes contact with our line here, or our ground plane, if you will, I'm going to go ahead and take my transform tool and I'm going to squash it down. So when you're in a squash position, this can really be a depiction of the form either flattened out due to some sort of great pressure, or it could be bunched up or pushed together. That's what you get when you squash something. So I may want to kind of come down from the top like this, starting to kind of squash it down. And it really kind of depends on how extreme you want to go with it. It depends on what kind of ball it is you're dealing with in this case. Now, having done that, you don't want to just leave it at that. You want to think about the distribution of the mass, that volume. If you push down on it from the top, that mass has got to go somewhere else. It just doesn't disappear. So we want to come out from the side like this as well as a direct result of that. And that's something you can experiment just with a rubber ball in your hand by kind of squishing it. So maybe something like that. Now, having done this, I'm noticing that it's not touching the ground plane again. So I'm going to come back up to that keyframe on our peg layer that we used to move the ball. I'm going to grab my translate tool from my advanced animation toolbar and pull that back down just right there. Okay, so what do we have so far? Well, we have our first and end keyframes, which basically have the ball in its perfect circular state. And so we have interpolation taking in between those three keyframes. And so that's kind of what we're getting right now. So we're not quite there yet. Due to that interpolation, you can see how it's already starting to squish in midair before it makes contact with the ground. That's not really natural. I don't want that. We really don't want that to happen until it makes contact. So we want to go to the keyframe right before in this case, and I want to stretch the ball out this time. So going back to my transform tool, we'll go ahead and kind of stretch it out. And again, as you do this, be just conscious of the volume of the object. So maybe something kind of like that. All right, so I'm kind of liking how that's looking. So now it feels a lot more flexible, okay? So pretty interesting stuff. And you could keep on kind of going further, starting to refine it even more, maybe coming out beyond once it's squashed. And we could start to take it back more into its original state. So I could probably copy that end keyframe, maybe bring it right about, say here, paste it right there. You could maybe add just a little bit of stretching to it. And if we go ahead and play that, pretty cool stuff. All right, so you kind of get the idea of what we can do with squash and stretch. I want to show you another example of a character to kind of convey this in that regard. So here's a little mouse character that I have, and basically if we scrub through, you can see I've got him kind of like shouting or yelling at something or someone. Just a real simple set of drawings here. But you can see how to really emphasize this action that I'm trying to present, this emotion, I'm stretching his body out as he's shouting, and it's stretching towards the direction of whatever it is he's shouting at, okay? And we can just click play. It'll happen really quick, but you can kind of see that motion, like he's saying, hey, hey. Now, we could take this a lot further and add some squashing to this character, okay? To really kind of make it feel a lot more fluid, a lot more natural. Now, I'm going to show you just one drawing to kind of get the point across. I'm not going to do all the in-betweens, but I will show you kind of the finished product. I'll pause the video and bring that up. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to take all of these drawings right here, and I'll just move them over a couple of cells. I'm going to delete those there as having extended the exposure, having done that. And I'll turn on my onion skin, and actually while we're at it, let's switch to drawing mode. I think it'll be a little bit easier to see just with that white background. And I'll zoom in here a little too. Okay, so here he is in his just upright state, kind of neutral state before he goes into that stretched out position. So I may want to kind of squash his body down. And so when I mean squash, it doesn't mean necessarily I'm squishing him or flattening him out, but just the pose itself is kind of compressed down. So I'll kind of draw what I would think might be the extreme pose, kind of the maximum point of his body doing that. So his head may be like kind of right here. I'll keep this pretty sketchy, just kind of drawing this pose. I'll pause the video and bring up this example where I've got additional in-betweens to kind of smooth it out a little bit more. So his head might be right about here. And if he's coming down like this, we'll probably have some drag on the ears and the hair. And that's really another principle that we are going to talk about in this course, where you have a little bit of drag like that. So kind of overlap and follow through. That's another principle. We'll be talking about that later on. So something kind of like this, where his body's kind of coming down. Might have a kind of a bend to the body. Arm might be kind of up like that. Might see part of the other arm back there. So he's kind of going into that. And, you know, just thinking about even having the eyes closed, kind of a little bit of compression just kind of right there. So he would go into this pose before leading into that stretched out pose. And so this will give us something that feels just a lot more fluid and flexible. I'm going to pause the video real quick and bring up the same example where we've got the nice clean line work and some additional in-between so you can kind of see it more clearly, and we'll kind of break it down from there. Okay, so here's that same pose, right? We have the line work over it now. And I've also got some in-betweens kind of leading from that neutral state where he kind of leads into that. But you can see how I'm basically compressing his pose, just the way his body is posed, before leading into that sudden stretched out pose. Okay, so basically we have 1, 2, 3, 4 drawings there, but really not even that. We have basically 1, 2, 3, and it's really that fourth one right there that I've added is kind of coming out of it, easing into or leading into that stretched out pose. But just with a few drawings there, you can kind of see how we're getting some of that squashing in there. If we click play, that feels just a lot more fluid, a lot more flexible, and thus just a lot more interesting. Now, I've also sprinkled in some other principles from the 12 Principles of Animation in here. Again, some overlap and follow through, stuff that we'll kind of talk about later on. I want to show you one more example of kind of what we can do where it's just a character's face. So here we have this kind of cartoony face, and you can kind of think of this character's head much like the beach ball. So if I just kind of click play, you can kind of see how we get a little bit of squashing and stretching in there. Now we could take this and push it even further. This is just kind of an example where I just want to kind of show it to you and kind of talk about how we could really go further with it. So you can kind of see how we're coming out of that neutral, this is kind of our neutral initial pose, and I'm kind of compressing him down. So maybe right here, after this drawing, we could add another drawing. And I'll turn on my onion skin. You can kind of see right there. So probably what I'd want to do is take the second drawing that we have right here. I'm going to go ahead and copy it, paste it, and I'll extend the I want to extend the exposure. So I'll go ahead and right click and click extend exposure. And so I can kind of use my onion skinning as a point of reference, but I may want to take this and squish him even further, okay? And again, you want to kind of think about the distribution of the volume. I use the onion skinning as kind of a reference to kind of see where I was before and where I will be after. Something kind of like that. And so on this drawing now, you want to think about not just squishing the form itself, but also think about other attributes. We could even take the mouth, stretch it even further. And I'm just using my cutter tool to kind of do a lot of this. But things like the eyes, you might want to do something kind of like this where his eyes are kind of being compressed. That's kind of what I did with the mouse. So facial features themselves, think about squashing them. You may want to even take something like this where you take the eyebrows and kind of bring them down. So I'm kind of cutting this up. It's not perfectly clean now, but I'm just trying to kind of illustrate the point one final time here with this example. So something like that. So he squashes down before kind of leading back up into that stretched pose. And maybe I don't want that to be kind of the extreme pose for the stretching of the face. We may want to have something even a little bit more extreme. So we'll go ahead and put in just another drawing there. And what I'll do is I'll just copy this one. We'll paste it. And then I'll just kind of stretch it out even more. So something kind of like that. And again, think about the distribution of the volume, kind of like what we talked about with the beach ball. And then we can come in here and just kind of do a lot of other little things with the different facial features. And you may notice with this animation that I've already kind of adjusted the exposure for some of these different drawings to kind of tweak the overall timing. And again, I'm just using the cutter tool. So something kind of like that. So just adding a couple of additional drawings to push the squashing and stretching even further, I have something that feels just a little bit more fluid, just a little bit less rigid. Not to say that it was completely rigid before, but now just adding a few more, kind of examining this example and pushing it just a little bit further. But again, just kind of think of this head much like our ball example, okay? You can really use squash and stretch to convey a lot of expressions by not just taking the form itself and squashing and stretching it, but also facial features as well. All right? So feel free to kind of look at the 3 different sets of project files that we have for this lesson on squashing and stretching. We have a 3 begin, 3 end, 3.1 begin, 3.1 end, and then a 3.2 begin and 3.2 end. So kind of those three sets of project files here for the examples that we've gone over in this lesson. All right, in our next lesson, we're going to be talking about straight ahead and pose to pose as our next principle of animation. So stick around. We'll see you then.